Hi, I'm Ariel Swedback, and this is my Coming to America project. So the first page in my scrapbook is a dedication page. I dedicated my scrapbook to my grandparents, and I chose to place a poem there that my grandma actually used in a project similar when she was in grade school. And then I have my title page, just 2 pictures of myself. One thing I did choose to do throughout my scrapbook was to round the edges of my photographs. I just like that style a little bit more. And the few photos that I didn't, I actually put like edges on them, scrapbooking edges on them to kind of give it a little bit more finished look. But I just have my table of contents, and I kind of stayed with a color scheme throughout my book to give it the same look. I chose green, brown, and a reddish color throughout it. And I also used one font throughout it because I wanted to make it look the same. For my family tree, I actually used a PowerPoint for my board as well. I have the same one as here. And what I did is I chose a picture of my family on vacation, and I made it transparent and then put boxes over it. And I felt that was really unique because everyone else built theirs, using like leaves or something, which kind of seemed very normal compared to this. I wanted to be a little bit more original. And plus that way I didn't have to make a family tree board also. This is my autobiography. One thing I really did like about this project was that it was over the span of a few months, so I never really felt as stressed out as I thought I would. Over the summer I was really nervous about getting everything done, but you really do get all of the hard things done in class, and then all you have to worry about is the actual making of your scrapbook. So for me, I already had my autobiography done, and I had it edited by my English teacher, Mr. Lang, so all I really had to worry about was getting the pictures done and the captions. One thing I did pick to do was write my own captions, which I wouldn't really suggest. I had a lot of trouble with it because you really have to be space conscious and you have to know exactly what you're going to write before. But if you feel that your handwriting's neat enough and that you really want to make it more personal like I did, it is a good idea, but it's a lot harder. So I would just be careful about doing that, especially if you don't have really good spelling like I do. This page was not mandatory, but I chose to do it anyway. It was a page for my sibling, who was my sister. Just some pictures, and then I just wrote a small message to her. And on this page I had my first interesting story, which was about my dad, and about when he was 3 years old and he ran his car through the house. One or two mistakes I made throughout the book was when I was captioning the photos, I wasn't accurate on the dates, which is something when I showed to family later, they kind of got mad at me about because this is something you're going to keep forever, so you want to make sure it's as accurate as possible. For example, this photo was not when he was 3 years old. I thought it was because that's what my dad said, so I would just check with other family members before you caption things. My next page is my immigration story page. This is the page I did work the hardest on because it was really important to me. It's a story of my mom's immigration, and it was really cool because I had actually never seen these photos that's on this page and the documents, and I really didn't know too much about the story, so doing this really showed me what my mom had gone through. You don't really think of your parents as living in another country for half their lives, but my mom did. And it was really cool for me to see these photos because when her family left the country she was born in, they weren't allowed to keep many of the photos. So many of them were hidden in secret compartments in my cousin's teddy bear, for example, and things like that. So that made it really interesting for me to look at. And one thing I did do was take my grandfather's USSR passport, and I kind of made a mini copy of it right here. And I did that by taking 2 pieces of photo paper and gluing them together. Okay. On this page is my second interesting story, which is about my great-great-grandfather and his journey through a lot of hardships. He was in a concentration camp, and he was also taken away by a river when he was a child, so he was raised by a Muslim family. And then he was sent to a Siberian work camp, so he spent his whole life basically trying to find his way back home. And I've always loved this story. It's one of my favorite family stories, and it was also really cool for me to finally have a face to put to the character that I'd always heard about, because my grandfather looked through his old files and he found a picture of his father, which is the person the story is about, and his name was Gabriel. And so this was the first time I ever really knew what he looked like, which was really cool. Another thing was getting government documents, which I really wasn't sure I was going to be able to get. It was something I really did want to include in my scrapbook, but because my family did not grow up here, I mean my mom's family, and that's who I did my immigration story on, and because all of the tension when they were leaving, they didn't really have any documents, but I was really happy to be able to find some through, like, my grandfather found, like, very few, but there were some, and I was really happy to include them. And on the adjoining page is my family recipe, which is one of really, like, the few things that really binds my family together. It's this recipe called plov, and it's a really, really old dish that is kind of like rice pilaf in other cultures. I think it kind of even derived from that dish. But I actually brought it in for my family history presentation, which was really fun. And it was cool to being able to share something that I really only thought of as something that belonged to my family with my whole class. It was really an interesting experience. And these pictures were actually taken while my grandparents were making the plov for my family history presentation, which I thought was pretty cool. Then I have my works cited. I would just go through and be careful to look for any mistakes. I would just proofread it, because I didn't proofread it and there was only about one mistake, but it's better to have it obviously as realistic as possible. And also just to make sure everything was accurate, like I said, because I think this was the other place where I made the mistake, that my grandmother's project, which I used in mine and I mentioned earlier, was it was written on a different date, and that was a bit disappointing to her, that she didn't really get the recognition she deserved as being, like, I think she was actually my age 14 versus being, I think I put her as being 12 when she wrote it. So just check for mistakes.